I'm Michael Bain, and welcome to Triggered, coming to you as always from the secret hidden bunker in the Rocky Mountains and Dragon House Studios. And I am happy to be back in Colorado after a week at the GUNSITE Academy in Prescott, rhymes with Biscuit, Arizona, with my good friends Dave Spalding, of course, one of the finest instructors in the entire world, handgun combatives, Dave Biggers, Bob Radecki from Glock, and my friend Tim Wegner, who founded Blade Tech. Tim is obviously a great holster designer, great knife designer, big game hunter, and world-class chef. So hey, all the pieces were in place. But we took the GUNSITE 250 class. That's the basic pistol class at GUNSITE. And as I've said here before, I've said on the podcast for years, I've said on Shooting Gallery, I've said on the Best Defense, I think I said once on the History Channel, if you take no other class, take the GUNSITE 250 class, because that is the baseline. That is the grounding of where we've all gone over the years. It's a class that is based on a series of drills that have been refined over the years. We'll talk a little bit more about that in the last segment. One of the things I did there, though, at the 250 class is I thought, well, if I'm going, let's test something. So what I decided to test was a gun you've seen here before. This is from SDS Imports. It's made in Turkey by Tisas. I called it Zagane in Turkey. Here it's a PX-9. This is a PX-9 Generation 3. We talked about it because I liked it a lot. So I thought, well, the honest way to test a gun is not to shoot 200 rounds sitting on the bench in my backyard and then tell you this or that or the other. It's always best to stress test a gun in what it's supposed to be doing, e.g. training, competition, carry. Those things stress a gun. So I took the PX-9, and in the course of 1,000 rounds in 5 days, you know you shot a lot when you got a blister on your trigger finger, but this gun was a rock. This gun worked 100%. Very, very pleased with how well it ran. Very pleased with how well it shot. Funny, lots of friends and the instructors who are also friends of mine, Lou Gosnell was our lead instructor, would kind of go, is it still working? I'm like, hey, it's Tuesday, it's Wednesday, it's Thursday, it's Friday. This thing is still rocking right on. But that is a valid test of a gun, because I can promise you, if a gun is going to break, it's going to break when you've traveled halfway across the country and spent a lot of money to be in a place. That's why I actually bought a second PX-9. You also saw this one. This is a Generation 2. I think it's no longer imported. But it's the same basic gun, slightly different. But just as an aside, when you take a class, any class, it's probably smart to bring a spare gun, because you've made a big commitment to be there. It's cost you a lot of money. You're staying in some like hotel with cockroaches on the wall, at least not in Arizona. So bring the spare gun. For those of you who don't know, GUNSITE, of course, was founded by Colonel Jeff Cooper in 1976 as the American Pistol Institute. Key thing to know about Colonel Cooper is not so much that he invented all this stuff, but Cooper was the first person to really codify the teaching of the pistol in a very specific way. He focused on having a full-size service pistol, the weaver stance, some sort of isometric tension, a specific draw stroke, a flash sight picture, and compressed surprise break, trigger break. By codifying that, codifying the safety rules, we're familiar with those 4 rules that were codified by Colonel Cooper. What he was able to do is structure pistol training in such a way that it worked, and it worked for civilians, because if you remember you may not remember, in 1976, if you wanted pistol training, you needed to get it from a police academy, because there was very little civilian training at all available. So when Cooper founded API, which became GUNSITE, it literally changed the world. We're going to talk a little bit more about this gun when Triggered returns. Welcome back to Triggered, where we're discussing my trip to GUNSITE and the 250 class last week. Now let's talk about the PX-9, just a little about how it functioned. First, I want to tell you that I set it up assuming success. I set it up with the things that I knew would work because I wanted to focus on the pistol. It's got a red dot on it. It's a Trijicon RMR. It's a Trijicon RMR I've used over the last couple of years. The sight's a rock. I know it's 100%. I mounted it on the gun exactly as we taught in shooting gallery last season. A very specific way to mount this sight on the gun to make sure that it stays on the gun and doesn't end up like in your grill, right? When the threads shear off of it. So mounted the sight very specifically, and then I sighted it in, as we've been talking about over the last year and a half, 2 years. I sighted it in at 10 yards and then verified it at 25 yards. When I got to GUNSITE, I sighted it in again because that's what you do. I think I had to make a one-click left adjustment, something like that. Nothing of any consequence. The gun was pretty close to being there. The other thing I did, you have multiple grip panels for this gun, and I kept trying different combinations until I came up with this one. This one, which feels good in my hand. Not only that, in the course of 5 days and 1,000 rounds and probably many more draws, I still find this a super comfortable grip. I didn't have any hot spots, nothing rubbed against a finger. There were no odd feelings on it after a lot of presentations from the holster. I want to mention the holster and magazines also, just in terms of if you're doing a class, the necessity for preparing yourself for success. Really boring. It's from Comp-Tac. It's for Springfield XDM. It fits these guns perfectly. This is, for me, a class holster, pretty much what I want to use. Same thing, magazine pouch from Comp-Tac. 4 SIG 226 magazines. The magazines that I used in the class are these guys. These are SIG 20 round magazines. The 226 has been my bedside gun for 30 years, maybe longer. I think I'm on my third 226 that served that duty. So one of the things that attracted me to the 226 way back in the dawn of time was there were factory 20 round magazines available for it. So I have a bunch of them. And by bringing the SIG magazines that I knew worked 100%, I eliminated magazine issues. Because generally, if you're going to have an issue with a gun, a semi-auto, what's the first thing you look at? You look at the magazine. So I found the gun comfortable. I found the gun came to my eye really, really well. Actually, Dave Spalding made a couple of changes of grip. Lou Gosnell tightened my grip just a little bit there. But I found that I was able to draw the gun and have it on target and the red dot there for me very, very quickly. GUNSITE uses a pretty standard, I think 5-step grip, up, 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 slap, boom. And it works. Works. That presentation, not grip, but presentation. I try to think over the 25 years or so I've been to GUNSITE back and forth or under GUNSITE instructors. I've never found one better or one faster or one more consistent. So all in all, I used 4 different kinds of ammunition with this gun. Now that was the only glitch I had, is I had some ammunition waiting for me out at GUNSITE. I'd never used any in this gun. The first hour I had 3 stovepipes and it was ejecting rounds about this far. I'm like, ha! So essentially the round's a little light for the gun. I went to a Federal Lawman 124 grain, also shot some Federal 115 grain and some double tap ammunition in there. Once we got past that first hour, the gun ran without a hitch. No problems, no runs, no hits, no errors. It went bang every time I drew it and I pulled the trigger. So let me say that I think the PX-9 is an excellent gun. And I think, what's $599, something like that, in MSRP, but honestly, you're going to see these guns knocked at least 100 off that. So I got to tell you, it works good. I like the flat trigger a lot. I got little girly skin. I always get like blisters on my trigger finger. It happens, but I got this blister on the trigger finger like roughly Friday afternoon in the shootout. So I'm like, who cares? We're going to talk a little bit about GUNSITE when Triggered returns. This week's Triggered is brought to you by Arms Corps, Rock Island. What's your passion? SDS Imports and Tisas. Tisas delivers more. Taurus, USA. Always ready, always bring it. Anvil Quartzin. Build it better. Welcome back to Triggered, where we're talking about our trip to GUNSITE here with the Tisas PX-9 Gen 3 Tactical from SDS Imports. Of course, a sponsor of ours. I want you to be very clear on that. One thing I was really sad I couldn't have on this gun was it comes with an optional magazine well, but the magazine well is a little tight when working with the SIG 20 rounders, which are the magazines that I had. So I took the magazine well off. It's not that big an issue. But I wanted to talk just a little bit about GUNSITE. And I think that GUNSITE, with its instructors, with its existing instructor base, which is very large, with its instructors who've been there before, easily represents the largest body of knowledge about shooting that exists in the world today. When you look at the GUNSITE instructor database, what you see is real-world experience. You see real-world experience in military, you see real-world experience in law enforcement, you see real-world experience as hunting guides, you see real-world experience in competition. For example, my good friend Lou Gosnell, who taught the class we're in, Lou is now, I think, the training director at GUNSITE. Of course, Ken Campbell, one of the 3 nicest guys in the world, is the CEO. And most recently, my friend Sherry Legate, for many, many years, is now the marketing director at GUNSITE. So, hey, it is a family. But Lou, in addition to a career in law enforcement in California, which, Lou, you're a better man than I am, Gungadin, he also has a pretty substantial competition career, which includes USPSA, it includes 3-gun. In fact, Lou won one of the legendary Soldier of Fortune 3-gun matches. Those are the matches that ultimately defined 3-gun. And he also won the first End of Trail, the first Cowboy World Championships. So all this information flows in. And then there's a constant interchange of information within the instructor base. If GUNSITE wants to change something, the instructors all have to agree on it. So you've got a lot of people with a lot of different experience evaluating techniques as they come in. Something I adopted, by the way, for the Best Defense is that no one in the Best Defense, whether it's me as executive producer or Michael Janich or Mike Seeklander, Rob Pincus, or my producer Jeff Murray, nobody could say, here's what we're going to do. Instead, it had to be 100% agreement in terms of doctrine. But there is so much knowledge at GUNSITE. And I know one of the things you're going to say is, well, that Weaver stance. You know, I took this class a couple of years, right before the world ended, 2019, and in it were 2 GUNSITE instructors, Steve Hendricks, a good friend of mine, and Randy Watts, who's one of the finest firearms instructors in the world, GUNSITE Range Master. And in the course of that class, the instructor said, all stances have some element of isometric tension. Wonder who said that? Well, it wasn't Jeff Cooper, it was Rob Latham. So once you understand shooting and you understand what a stance is doing for you and you understand what you're doing with drawing, it gives you a lot of power to change those things. The reason I think that you need to take the 250 class, and you need to go to GUNSITE Park because it's a great mother church. Super facility, great classrooms. I don't know, 30 ranges all over the place, out to everything. 2 shoot houses. The dongas, essentially they're washed out ravines with targets hidden in them, and you have to work your way down it. The gunsmithy itself, the pro shop, which, hey, you can get yourself a really nice sweatshirt. GUNSITE is a destination that you as a shooter need to go. But most importantly, with a grounding at GUNSITE, when you take other classes, you can kind of understand Bruce Lee's maxim of absorb what's useful, but at the same time, take that which is uniquely your own and make that uniquely your own. You understand what Bruce Lee was getting at. You have GUNSITE grounding. Take other classes, and as I mentioned, the GUNSITE instructors do. I do. You should do as well. And then evaluate that information and take the parts of it that you can make uniquely your own. So I am a huge fan of GUNSITE, and you should be as well. I kind of wanted to close with a great quote from Colonel Jeff Cooper. I was lucky enough, after the Colonel passed, I did the last interview with Colonel Cooper, and I was at GUNSITE, and people there said, Mrs. Cooper, Janelle would maybe like to spend some time with you private. And so I went up to the sconce, the house there, and sat down with Janelle Cooper for a little while, had some iced tea and lemonade. And one of the things she said to me, which I was very proud of, she said, you know, Jeff liked you, but sometimes you aggravated him so much. I said, Miss Cooper, I have that effect on people. There's a great quote from Jeff Cooper. It's something to the effect of, blessed are those who in the face of death think only about the front sight. I'm Michael Bain. This is Triggered. Of course, you can find us on michaelbain.tv, where we're free as a veritable bird. You can also find us on YouTube, on Rumble. We'll have links. Everything we've talked about here, you can find the links. And we will see you next week.